A crowbar cracked against chrome in the dark. Metal screamed. A second man dropped to his knees beside the front wheel, wires in his fist, working fast. 3 of them. One of them kept watch. The parking lot was empty except for a single flickering sign and the machine they were trying to steal, a big Harley, all chrome, worth more than she made in a year. Inside, the last light in the diner clicked off. A woman pushed the back door open with her hip, a trash bag in one hand. She stopped. She saw them. And instead of running back inside, she set the bag down, grabbed the broom leaning by the wall, and started walking straight toward 3 men in the dark. Her name was Dana Coyle. What she did in the next 90 seconds, nobody in that town saw coming. Stay with me on this one. Now let me back up a little because you need to understand who this woman was before that night. Dana Coyle worked the counter at a truck stop diner on the edge of Barstow, out where the highway runs flat and mean toward the desert. She'd been there 4 years. Before that, 5 years somewhere else. Before that, a marriage that fell apart the way a lot of them do, quietly, then all at once. She was 34 years old and she looked 40, and she'd have told you that herself without any bitterness, because bitterness was a luxury and she couldn't afford one. She had a son, Toby, 9 years old, gap in his front teeth, obsessed with dinosaurs and anything with an engine. He was the whole reason she got up in the morning, and he was the whole reason she couldn't sleep at night. Because Dana was drowning, not the loud kind of drowning, the quiet kind. The kind where you smile at the customers and refill the coffee, and every single night you sit at the kitchen table with a stack of envelopes and a calculator and you try to make numbers do something they will not do. The rent was late. The car needed brakes. Toby needed shoes again because 9-year-olds grow like weeds. And her hours had just been cut because the diner was slow, because everything was slow. She'd started skipping her own lunch to stretch the grocery money one more day. She never told Toby that. A mother learns how to make going without look like a choice. So she took the closing shift nobody else wanted. 6 at night to close 5 nights a week. Alone mostly once the dinner rush thinned out. And that's how she came to know the old man. He came in every night around 9. Same stool at the end of the counter, the one against the wall where he could see the door. He rode up on that enormous chromed Harley, killed the engine, and walked in slow, favoring his left knee. Big man. Even hunched with age, you could tell he'd been enormous once. Silver beard down to his chest. Leather vest gone soft and cracked with the years, covered in patches Dana didn't understand and didn't ask about. Hands like tools. And on the back of one of those hands, a faded tattoo of a skull with wings. He never said much. Coffee, black, whatever's hot. That was about it. He'd eat his meatloaf or his eggs, leave a tip that was too big for a man dressed like that, and ride off into the dark. And every night he brought the dog, old blue heeler, gray around the muzzle, one milky eye, hips that didn't work right anymore. The dog would follow him in, circle twice, and drop down at his boots with a groan like an old door. The man called him Diesel. Health code said no dogs. Dana never said a word. Some nights she'd slip a piece of bacon down under the counter, and the old man would catch her doing it, and the corner of his mouth would move, just barely, under all that beard. That was the closest thing to a conversation they had for the first 2 years. Then one night, slow, empty, rain coming down outside, he spoke up on his own. Nodded at the photo she kept taped by the register, Toby in a paper dinosaur mask. Yours. That's my boy, Dana said. Toby. The old man looked at that picture for a long moment. Something moved behind his eyes, something old and far away. Good age, he said. Hold on to it. And that was all. Over time, she pieced together a name. The other truckers, the regulars, they called him Deacon, said it careful like the word had weight. One night, an old rig driver leaned across the counter and told her low, "You know who that is, right? Roy Vance, Deacon Vance. He was somebody back in the day, real somebody. You don't want to know the half of it. Then he wouldn't say more. He just paid his check and looked back once at that stool by the wall, like a man looking at a thing from a story he'd heard as a kid. So here's the picture. A broke single mother running out the clock on a dying diner. An old outlaw at the end of the counter with his broken-down dog. Two people at the tail end of hard lives, who'd found this quiet little hour together every night without ever really talking about it. Neither one of them knew it meant anything. That's the thing about the moments that change your life, you almost never see them coming. Now, back to that parking lot. It was a Tuesday, almost 11. Deacon had come and gone hours before, same as always. The place was dead. Dana had cashed out the register, wiped down the counter, and killed the lights. She grabbed the trash and shoved the back door open with her hip, tired all the way down to her bones. And she heard it, that crack of metal on metal. Then a low voice hissing at another voice to hurry up. She stepped out and saw them. 3 men crouched around the big Harley, Deacon's Harley. She knew that bike. She'd know that bike anywhere. One of them had a crowbar. One had the ignition torn half apart. The third stood watch, and he was the first to see her. "Somebody's out here," he said. "Now let me tell you what a smart person does in that moment. A smart person backs inside, locks the door, and calls the police, and lets the insurance company sort out a stolen motorcycle. It's a machine. It's metal and rubber. It is not worth a woman's life." Dana knew that. Every sensible cell in her body knew that. Her hand was already on the door. All she had to do was step back through it. But all she could think about was the old man's face. That hunched walk. The way he'd sit at her counter alone every single night with nobody in the world but a dying dog. And how that bike wasn't a machine to him. It was the last thing that still made him tall. So she didn't go back inside. She set the trash bag down. She picked up the push broom leaning against the wall, the one she used to sweep the lot. Cheap wooden handle, worn bristles. She pulled her phone out of her apron with her other hand, thumbed 911, and she started walking straight at 3 men in the dark. "Get away from that bike," she said. Her voice was shaking. She kept walking anyway. The one with the crowbar stood up. He was young, wiry, mean-looking, and he laughed at her, actually laughed. "Go back inside, lady. Mind your business." "This is 911. What's your emergency?" A voice in her ear, tinny, small. The most important sound in the world right then. And Dana did something clever. She didn't argue with the thieves. She talked to the phone loud so they could hear every word. "Yeah, 3 men stealing a motorcycle, Route 15 diner, the roadside off exit 184, plate number." She squinted at the back of the bike, at the plate lit up by the flickering sign, and she read it out slow and loud. 27 Frank Delta William 61. 27 Frank Delta William 61. Silver, 3 of them, one's got a crowbar, please hurry. Watch what she just did there. She read the plate out loud. Now those 3 men knew that even if they killed her, the police already had the bike, the plate, the location. Stealing it just got a whole lot less worth it. She was a waitress with a broom, and she just outthought 3 grown men. The crowbar guy took a step toward her. The easy laugh was gone off his face now. "Hang up the phone." "No," Dana said. "Hang up the phone or I'll." "You'll what?" She lifted the broom, both hands, planted her feet, and put her body flat between them and the Harley. "The cops have your plate. They have your description. You want to add assault and murder to grand theft. Over a bike you can't even ride out of here now. Go, just go." For a second, nobody moved. The whole world came down to about 10 feet of cracked asphalt and a flickering sign buzzing overhead. She could hear her own heart. She could hear the wire in the ignition tick against the chrome where the second man had let go of it. She did not lower the broom. Then, way off across the lot, an engine turned over. Headlights snapped on, and a low, heavy rumble rolled across the dark, a big Vite wind idling, the kind of sound you feel in your chest. Nobody had noticed the shape parked way out at the edge of the lot in the shadows, but it had been there the whole time, and now it was moving, slow, headlights sweeping toward them. That was all it took. The lookout bolted first, then the guy with the ignition. The crowbar guy backed up, pointed the bar at Dana, said something ugly, and then he ran too, all three of them vanishing over the fence line into the dark scrub behind the lot. And Dana stood there, broom still up, legs shaking so hard she had to lean on the handle, phone still going in her hand, the dispatcher saying, "Ma'am, are you there?" The headlight rolled up close and stopped. The engine cut, and there he was, Deacon, Roy Vance, sitting on a second, older bike she'd never seen, must have come back for some reason, or maybe he'd never really left. He looked at the torn-up ignition on the Harley. He looked at the fence where the men had gone. Then he looked at Dana Coyle, standing there in her apron with a push broom, out of breath, terrified and unmoved. He didn't say a word. Not one. He just looked at her for a long, long moment, and then slow he nodded. One nod. The kind of nod that means more than a whole speech from most men. Then he swung the old bike around, thumbed the starter, and rode off into the night, and the sound of him faded out down the highway until there was nothing left but the buzz of that broken sign. The cops came 20 minutes later, took her statement, said she was lucky. Said she never should have gone out there, and she agreed, and she meant it, and she'd have done exactly the same thing again anyway. They dusted the bike, wrote it all down, and left. Dana finished locking up, drove home, checked on Toby, asleep with a plastic triceratops in his fist. Sat down at the kitchen table with the envelopes and the calculator, same as every night, and her hands were still shaking when she picked up the pen. And that, she figured, was the end of it. The next night Deacon didn't come in. She kept glancing at the door around 9. Nothing. She told herself he was fine. Men like that came and went. The night after, nothing either. By the weekend she'd stopped looking. Life closed back over the whole thing the way it always does. Rent still late, brakes still bad. Toby still growing out of his shoes. The broom went back in the closet. The plate number faded out of her head. 3 weeks went by, ordinary and gray and hard, and Dana Coyle put that night away in the drawer where you keep the things that scared you, and she moved on. She thought it was over, it was just getting started. It was a Saturday afternoon when the knock came. Dana had the day off, first one in 2 weeks, and she was on the floor of the living room helping Toby glue a model volcano together for school. Flour and cardboard everywhere. She wasn't expecting anybody. When money's tight, a knock at the door is rarely good news. You learn to feel it in your stomach. She opened it, and there stood a man she had never seen. Gray suit, leather briefcase. Older, careful eyes. The kind of tired that comes from delivering hard news for a living. "Mrs. Coyle, Dana Coyle." "It's Miss who's asking." "My name is Harold Prentice. I'm an attorney." He paused, and something in the pause made her grab the doorframe. "I'm here about Roy Vance." And right there, before he said one more word, she knew. You always know. "He's gone, isn't he?" she said. "He passed away 11 days ago," Prentice said gently. "In his sleep. He'd been sick a good while, longer than he let on to anybody." He shifted the briefcase. "May I come in? There are some things I'm required to give you. Roy was very specific." She let him in, sat him at the kitchen table, the same table where she fought with the calculator every night. Toby peeked out from the living room, curious, and she waved him back. The lawyer set the briefcase down and clicked it open, and this is where everything Dana thought she understood about that night, about that quiet old man at the end of her counter, came apart and put itself back together as something else entirely. Because here's what she'd never known. Roy Deacon Vance wasn't just some broken-down old biker eating meatloaf alone. Prentice laid it out plain. Roy had ridden with the club for over 50 years. He'd been a founding officer of his charter, one of the last of the old guard, the men the younger ones called the originals. He'd buried 2 wives and a son. The son had died young and overdosed decades back, and Roy had never spoken of him again. He had no family left living, not one soul, but he was not a poor man. That's the part that stunned her most. All those years, all that meatloaf, that soft cracked vest, the man had money. Real money. He owned land outside of town, free and clear. He owned the little house he lived in. He had cash set aside, careful, the way men of his generation did, in accounts and in a safe. He drove a truck-stop diner every night, not because it was all he could afford, but because a lonely old man wanted somewhere warm to be and someone who was kind to his dog. Roy came to see me 16 days ago, Prentice said. He knew he didn't have long. He changed his will that afternoon. He was completely clear, sharp as a tack. I want you to understand that, because what he did on purpose, and he did it in his right mind. He sat in my office where you're sitting now, and he told me the whole thing, start to finish, and he never once wavered. Prentice slid an envelope across the table, thick, cream-colored, her name on the front in a shaky, heavy hand, Dana Coyle, and under it in the same hand, and the boy. She stared at it and did not touch it. There's more, Prentice said, and he set a set of keys on the table beside the envelope, a worn leather fob, a single fat ignition key, and 2 smaller ones. But he wanted you to read the letter first, before anything else. Those were his instructions. Now, I want to stop right here for a second, because if this old outlaw's kindness is landing on you the way it landed on Dana Coyle at that kitchen table, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button. Stories like this one, the quiet ones, the ones about people the world wrote off, that's what this whole channel is built on, and it's people like you sticking around that keep them coming. All right, back to that kitchen table and that envelope, and hands that had stopped shaking 3 weeks ago starting to shake all over again. Dana opened it, careful, like it might break. Inside were several pages, folded, covered in that same heavy handwriting, a man's hand that had clearly not written many letters in his life. She started to read. And I'm going to give it to you the way he wrote it, because there's no telling it better than he told it himself. Dana, it said, you don't know me. Not really. 2 years of coffee, and you never once asked me who I was, and I want you to know that's exactly why I'm writing this. Everybody who ever found out who I was wanted something. You never wanted anything. You just kept my coffee hot, and you fed my dog when you thought I didn't see. She had to stop, wipe her eyes, keep going. I watched you go out into that lot with a broom. 3 men, and you went at them with a broom over a hunk of metal that don't mean a thing to anybody but a stupid old man. You didn't know I was there. I sat and I watched, and I made myself not get up, because I wanted to see what you do when you thought nobody was watching. And you stood in front of my bike like it was worth your life. Nobody's done a brave thing for me in 30 years, girl. Nobody. And you did it for free, and you never told a soul, and you never asked me for a dime after. The next line she read 3 times. I outlived everybody I ever loved. My boy's been gone 40 years. I got no one to leave anything to, and I got more than a broke old man has any business having, and I have laid awake more nights than you'd believe trying to think of one single person in this world worth leaving it to. And then you walked out into that parking lot with a broom. Prentice sat quiet across the table, letting her read. He'd seen a lot of people open a lot of envelopes across a lot of kitchen tables, and he knew there was nothing to say and no reason to hurry her. Toby had crept back into the doorway. Dana didn't stop him this time. She just kept reading, tears coming now steady, dropping onto the paper. So here's what I did, the letter went on. And I don't want any argument about it, because I'm dead by the time you read this and you can't give it back. The house is yours, paid off, no note on it, deeds already changed. It's small, but it's good, and it's warm, and it's got a yard for that boy. No more late rent, Dana. Never again. You hear me? Never again. The land I owned outside town, I sold it. Prentice has got the money in a trust. Half of it's for you to do with what you want, to breathe, to fix your car, to sleep at night. The other half is locked up for the boy, for Toby. College, a trade, whatever he wants to be, it's there. Nobody can touch it. He's going to get to be whatever he dreams about, and you're never going to have to tell him no because of money. Not ever again. Dana put the pages down on the table. She couldn't see them anymore. She pressed both hands over her mouth. "There's a number," Prentice said quietly, and he told her the number in the trust, and I'm not going to tell you exactly what it was, but it was the kind of number that ends a certain kind of fear forever. The kind of number Dana Coyle had never in her life dared to imagine having. She made a sound that wasn't quite a word. Toby ran to her and grabbed her arm, scared, and she pulled him in and held on to him and couldn't get a sentence out. There was one more page. She made herself finish it. "And the bike is yours too," Roy had written. "I know you don't ride, don't matter. Keep it or sell it, that's up to you, but if you sell it to the club. They'll want it and they'll give you a fair price and then some, and they'll take care of you after because I'm going to ask them to and they don't tell me no. But I'd rather you keep it. Put it in the garage of that house. And when the boy's old enough, you teach him what it means, not the riding. The other thing, the thing you did with the broom, that's the only thing I ever learned worth passing on, and I learned it too late and you already knew it, so you teach him." The keys on the table were the keys to the house, the keys to the Harley, and a small key to a safe. "He asked me to give you one more thing by hand," Prentice said. He reached into the briefcase and set it on the table. It was small and heavy and it made a soft clink against the wood. A coin. Thick, worn brass gone dark with age. On one side the same skull with wings she'd seen tattooed on the back of his hand. On the other 3 words worn almost smooth by 50 years in an old man's pocket. Loyalty, honor, respect. "That's a challenge coin," Prentice said. "In his world that means something. He carried it his whole life. He wanted the boy to have it." The lawyer's careful voice caught, just slightly, for the first time. "He told me, and I'm quoting him, 'Tell her the boy's got more of that in him already than most men I ever rode with. Tell her not to let the world take it out of him.'" Dana couldn't speak. She just held the coin and her son, and she cried at the kitchen table where she'd cried so many other nights, except this time it was something so far from grief that she didn't have a name for it. They buried Roy Vance the following Thursday. Dana wasn't going to go at first. She felt like she had no right. 2 years of coffee, one night with a broom. Who was she to stand at that man's grave? But Prentice told her Roy had asked for her to be there, so she found a black dress and she left Toby with a neighbor and she drove out to the little cemetery on the edge of the desert. And what she saw when she came over the rise stopped her cold. Motorcycles. Hundreds of them, as far as she could see, lined up along the road and across the field and out of sight over the hill, all of them shut off now, silent, chrome throwing back the hard desert sun. And the men. Big men, old men, gray beards and leather and hard faces, standing in rows with their hats in their hands. The brotherhood Roy had ridden with for 50 years, come from all over the country to put one of the originals in the ground. Dana stood at the edge of it, tiny, sure she didn't belong. She almost turned around. She had her hand on the car door, ready to slip away before anybody noticed the waitress who didn't fit. And then one of them saw her. Old fellow, bald, arms like a young man still. He walked over slow. "You Dana," he said. "Yes, sir." He looked at her a long moment, the same way Roy used to. "Deacon told us about you," he said. His voice was rough. "The broom." And then this enormous hard old man's chin trembled just once and he got it under control. "You come stand up front, with us. He'd want you up front." And they parted, all those hard men, and they let a waitress in a borrowed black dress walk to the front and stand with the family Roy Vance never had by blood but built anyway over 50 years of the road. When they lowered him down, One of them set an old blue collar on the casket, Diesel's collar. The dog had died 4 days after Roy did. Wouldn't eat. Just laid down by the old man's chair and stopped. They buried the two of them together, the outlaw and his broken-down healer, the way it should be. Then every one of those hundreds of men fired up their bikes at the same moment, and the sound rolled up out of that desert like thunder with no sky to it, a wall of noise you felt in your teeth, in your chest, in your spine. The loudest goodbye Dana Coyle had ever heard, for the quietest man she'd ever known. That was a 1.5 years ago now. Dana and Toby live in the little house at the end of a dirt road outside Barstow. It's small and it's warm and there's a yard, and the deed sits in a drawer with her name on it and no note against it, just like he promised. She quit the diner 6 months back. She's in school now nights, becoming a nurse, something she'd wanted her whole life and never once let herself say out loud. Toby's in 5th grade. He's got new shoes that fit and he's going to keep having them. And one day he's going to be whatever a boy who dreams about engines and dinosaurs grows up to be, and there will be money there when he reaches for it. And he will never once know what it felt like to watch his mother cry over a stack of envelopes. The Harley's in the garage. She didn't sell it. She cleaned up the ignition those men had torn apart and she keeps it polished. And sometimes on a quiet evening she'll go out there and just sit near it, and she doesn't ride, but she understands now what it meant to the old man, and someday she'll teach the boy. The challenge coin lives on Toby's dresser. Loyalty, honor, respect, worn almost smooth. Some nights he holds it while he falls asleep, the way he used to hold his plastic triceratops. He knows the story. He knows a man he barely met changed his whole life because his mother picked up a broom one night and refused to move. And here's the thing Dana keeps coming back to. She didn't do it for a reward. There was no reward in her head that night, not for 1 second. There were 3 men and a bike and an old man who was kind to her, and she just couldn't stand there and let them take the last thing that made him tall. That's the whole reason. That's all it ever was. But that's exactly why it came back to her 100 times over. Because the world is full of people waiting to be paid before they'll do the right thing, and every so often, rare as rain in that desert, somebody just does it. For free. When nobody's watching. And every once in a great while, somebody is watching after all, a tired old outlaw at the end of a counter, and he never forgets. So the next time you're standing at some edge in the dark, and the smart thing and the right thing are pulling you 2 different ways, remember a waitress with a push broom who chose the right one and never asked for a thing and got back more than she ever dreamed. That's Dana Coyle. And that's the reward the old Hell's Angel left behind. Not the house, not the money. Those were just paper and keys. The real thing he gave her was the proof that the good she did in the dark had been seen all along. Rest easy, Deacon. She's going to teach the boy.